Hi there and welcome to the Die-House Drumworks. The track we've got to look at here today is from the Rockschool Grade 6 syllabus, and it's a track called East Coast. I would say probably that if you're starting out on the Grade 6 syllabus that this is quite a good one to get cracking with first off actually. There's a lot of repetition in the main groove, so you can sit back on it. There's not too much in the way of reading. Even when you get to the mid sections in the track where there's more syncopation and more movement in the kick and snare, the patterns are reasonably repetitive. So it might look at first glance as though there's a lot of work there, but it actually isn't perhaps quite as bad as it might look on the printed page. Concepts that we would probably spend a little bit of time on, I think, here with this one. A little bit on bass drum technique. Now, I'd say that that is probably the big sticking point for most people when they work through this track, is getting these pairs of 16th bass drums working. And it is tricky. There are plenty of drummers who don't really use that technique very much and play to a very high standard. One of the things with technique that we probably need to be comfortable with is that we don't have to be able to do everything to be a good player necessarily. So we don't want to give ourselves necessarily that get out. If there's something in that you see someone playing or that you hear on a record or you see from a printed chart that you really want to learn to do, don't just skirt around it and think, well, you know, I don't need to do that to become a good player. But attack the things and work on the things that you like the sound of and that you enjoy, because that will help to sort of shape your signature on the kit, and you'll always be playing in a way that you feel best reflects your own personality and your own idea of how the drum kit should be played. So yeah, 16th bass drums. The technique that I use, I'm just going to go over this very briefly because you won't be able to see it too well. But I use a little kind of twisting movement on the pedal, which pivots around the front of the foot. So I'll exaggerate that a little bit. That's the kind of movement that I use. What I think I'll probably do for grade 6 is actually run a lesson which is based specifically on bass drum techniques, and we'll get the camera a little bit lower so you can see all that, and we'll break it down a little bit more. But that's the technique I use. The other thing we need to consider with the sort of 16th feel in this track is that it uses swung 16ths. Now what that means is instead of the 16th note subdivision within the music being straight, we have a swung feel to it. And what that means is that all the 16th note offbeats, so if we're counting 1 E and a, 2 E and a, etc. through the bar, all the counts of E and A will fall slightly late. So we get a bouncy feel essentially to the 16ths. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. That's not to be confused with a shuffle. A shuffle would normally relate to the 8th note being swung or shuffled. I like to make the distinction myself that I call 16th notes swung and 8th notes shuffled. So that would be 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, rather than 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So in this track, the 8th notes, they remain constant. It's the offbeat 16ths that fall a bit late. Other concepts that I would look at in this particular track would be, you've got a couple of fills where pedal hi-hats are notated in quarter notes underneath, and in fact you've got that in one of the grooves as well. It's a great technique for creating continuity in your playing through your fills. So if you're playing a fill, a basic sort of tom snare fill, with a bit of hi-hat behind it in an 8th note, if you're going for an 8th note pattern, create a continuity in the top end of the kit there a little bit. Can also be good for illustrating the windows, if you like, in inverted commas. If you're playing quite a broken fill or a broken section within a song, it can help give the listener a sense of where the timing is. So where the time is against sort of maybe syncopated or broken up rhythm. The other thing that's quite useful for is it helps the band a little bit as well if you're playing something that's a little bit more broken up. It helps them latch onto where the pulse is, especially if you're playing away from that pulse, like I say, more syncopated or getting across the rhythm a little bit. So yeah, pedal hi-hats. I would suggest in this one you've got the pedal hi-hat written over the fill in the first time bar on the first page. Have a go at popping it over the fill in the second time bar as well. Whether you use that in your performance is entirely up to you. But it's a worthwhile little exercise just to get you used to doing that a little bit more. Again, in terms of the chart, reading at this level, luckily because you've got the 8th note hi-hat chugging away there, or the ride cymbal when we got to the second page, you've got a marker point to work out where all these bass drums and snare drums are going. So you can rely on your reading in terms of knowing what the crotchets, quavers, 16th notes are. But you can also see where notes are falling underneath the 8th note or in between, which makes the reading a little bit quicker and a little bit easier. There is a beat at the top of the second page which I consider to be a misprint. Now in terms of the notation in the chart, it actually makes up mathematical sense within the bar. If you've looked through this piece, you'll probably know which beat I'm referring to. At the top of the second page, we've got a pattern that's using a regular 8th note movement on the ride cymbal with what works out to be quarter notes on the hi-hat, apart from one hi-hat beat. So the natural sort of movement would be that as your accompaniment for the kick and snare. Now in the second bar of that pattern, as it's suggested, on the count of 3, you've got a 16th rest, and then the pedal hi-hat is displaced to 3E. To me, I can't see any benefit in that. I'm going to see that as a misprint. And actually, if memory serves me right, I've got a feeling that in a previous printing of this book, that pedal hi-hat was on the count of 3. Now this might seem like really picking at very, very small things to some people watching this. But you wouldn't believe the number of people, if you're used to reading charts and working on charts very, very closely, that's something that you could work on trying to do for quite a long period of time and actually not really gain anything by doing it. So it's a difficult investment when you're working through a chart to know, well, especially if it's an exam piece, to know, should it be like that or is it a mistake? But on the positive side, this is a judgment that you're going to have to make as a musician now and again to override what's in front of you, or maybe just go with your instincts. So it's a good lesson to learn as well. So when I play this, I'm going to be putting that pedal hi-hat plumb on the count of 3, so it'll be a regular quarter note hi-hat count at the top of page 2. The next stumbling block for a lot of people is the sextuplet fill at the end of the second line on page 2. It's quite tricky, but it's a really nice little movement if you can get it. It's using a grouping called a sextuplet, which is introduced in grade 6, all the 6s. And again, I think that's another area of this particular syllabus that I'll spend some time on in isolation. But if you think of a sextuplet as being fast triplets, so if we're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we're going to get diggity 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 diggity. So hopefully you can feel that subdivision there. The way I would build that fill up would be to just work on the hand and foot movements first. So rather than worrying about all the toms in that bar, just the sextuplet movement in isolation. Because it's the coordination between the hands and feet initially that is the tricky one. What you can do with things like that, once you've got that basic movement up to speed roughly, is put the track on and use the backing track as a metronome just to practice that sextuplet movement along to, so that you get really comfortable with it, nice and relaxed, and then think about putting it on the toms. Try and keep hold of your sticks. A little bit close there, I think. Something like that. Try and keep your movements around the toms nice and neat. The higher up you bring your hands, the less accurate the stick strokes are likely to be. So, especially when you're moving between toms quite quickly there, you'll find that you're hitting towards the edge, you're hitting hoops, you're hitting the cymbal. So keep the hands nice and neat movements, and try and think when you come off one drum, try and think of getting that first stick over to the next one as the second stroke is struck. You get this sort of movement, then off the second song. It creates a nice flow and it will get the speed that you're after. So yeah, that's pretty much the track. The only thing I would say also about this one is when we get to the solos, it's another great opportunity to maybe break away from the notated part, especially in the bass solo. For me, the energy drops quite considerably there and gives you an opportunity on the DS to really pick it up again. And because you had a lot of this 2 and 4, there's a lot. Okay, there are changes in the pattern, but there's a lot of this 2 and 4 snare drum, so it's a good opportunity maybe to cut away from that and just have a little break. Introduce some different ideas, show a bit of creativity for the examiner, and then get back to the business of the main theme again. One thing I actually like to do with this, but I'm not sure whether it's perhaps the best thing to do for an exam, is to stop playing in the bass solo. If I was playing this kind of track in a band, it would be a great opportunity to just have no rhythm at all, you know, as far as the bass is concerned. Just let the bass carry it, and then maybe come in towards the end of the bass solo. So. Like I say, it's not just about the exam pieces, it's about thinking about what we can learn from playing this music. So, going to have a play through, I'm sure I'll think of something else, but we'll have a crack and see what happens.
Coast.